Hey guys, Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer. We talk about music, books, and occasionally other things. And today we're doing part 2 of that series where I rank the first 100 albums that I've rated on Rate Your Music. This time we're doing numbers 80 through 61. Part 1 will be linked in the description, and as always, this is just my opinion, but feel free to leave yours in the comment section below. With that out of the way, let's get started with number 80, Can't Stop, Won't Stop by The Man. I said in my last video in this series that I'm not a big fan of this album or Black and White. That is still true, but I will say this album has a few more good songs than Black and White did. Girls Do What They Want has an amazingly catchy guitar riff, even if it does have some problematic lyrics. Kiss and Sell is super catchy. You Left Me is more of a pop song than a rock song, which is a nice change of pace. And, of course, I Must Be Dreaming, which I mentioned in my 10 amazing love songs you need to hear this Valentine's Day video. Unfortunately, the good songs in this category get bogged down by a sea of filler. Most notably the song Into Your Arms, which is a boring ballad which contains a line where John O'Callaghan replaces the word ass with the word smile and then says, "Bet you didn't expect that." Very funny. Other pieces of filler include the other boring ballad, Whoever She Is, the generic This Is the End, and Time to Go, which is just a song about how it's time to go somewhere. Not anywhere in particular or for any reason in particular, just it's time to go. Also, Everything I Ask For is a pathetic song. The guitar sounds super weak, and it's basically a song about a guy whose girlfriend is clearly abusing him, who is clearly in denial, to say the least. He's like, she's everything I ask for, even though she does all of this to me. This would not fly today, especially with how happy this instrumentation sounds. So yeah, this album has some really cringy moments, as well as some awesome moments. So, I'll give it a strong 6 out of 10. Number 79, Early Summer by Miami Nights 1984. So, for those of you who don't know, this album is in a genre called synthwave. It's basically a subgenre of electronic music that's loosely inspired by 80s action, science fiction, and horror movies. Miami Nights 1984 lean into the action side, and the whole album has this bright, summery feel to it. It's a perfect album to listen to while at the beach. That said, it does have its flaws. Some of the synth work on songs like On the Run and One Last Time can feel a little thin, and then there are songs like Sunset Cruise that are just kinda eh. My main problem with this album, however, is that it's 9 tracks long, 3 of which are interludes. Particularly, there's one really annoying interlude at the very end. Still, while I do have my criticisms of On the Run and One Last Time, I'd still argue they're pretty good songs. And also, the song Miami Funk is a great song to nod your head to. And Elevator of Love is way better than that title would imply. It's actually a pretty fun synthwave song. And then there's my personal favorite on this album, Early Summer. And that one is just a bright, happy summertime jam. Yeah, this album is pretty flawed, but thanks to its short length and a few good songs, I'll give it a light 7 out of 10. Number 78, Animal by Kesha. Kesha is one of my favorite artists. That said, she's kinda like 21 Pilots and The Main, in that her best albums came later. Sure, her first album, Animal, is good, but man, is it flawed, and compared to Warrior and Rainbow, it's kinda weak. On one hand, there are a few masterpieces on here, like the gloriously sarcastic Kiss and Tell and Backstabber, the rocking Party at a Rich Dude's House, the surprisingly emotional and deep Dancing with Tears in My Eyes, and the single Take It Off, which is the best single from this album easily, and also the song that cemented her status as the artist for Outcasts. Unfortunately, this is one of those albums where the singles kinda suck outside of Take It Off. I mean, TikTok has a good chorus and whatnot, but the verses annoy me to no end. Just Kesha's obnoxious delivery, the farting synthesizers, it's just annoying. And Your Love Is My Drug is the most mediocre pop song on here. And then we get to the second single, Blah Blah Blah. Blah 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 is one of the most obnoxious balls of noise I've ever heard. And unlike actual noise music, it doesn't even bother to create interesting soundscapes with the noise. It just sounds like someone throwing random objects at a synthesizer while a dentist drills into my mouth. Yes, it's that annoying. Also, the lyrics are super obnoxious on this. And they're also just incredibly objectifying. Like, the whole song is basically about how both Kesha and the guest artist 303 are way over the top obnoxious, and they don't care about each other's personalities at all. And even as they're telling each other to shut up, they still want to have sex. What? This is basically what pop music sounds like to people who hate pop music. But unlike hyperpop, which is interesting and experimental about it, this just sounds like every other Kesha song, minus anything that makes those songs fun. The song Dinosaur is also pretty bad, but it has a catchy enough melody that I can kinda see why someone would like it, unlike Blah Blah Blah. Then there are a bunch of songs like Animal, Boots and Boys, and whatnot that are just kinda okay. So yeah. This balances out to a light 7 out of 10. It's good, but there are plenty of better Kesha albums out there. Number 77, Justice by Justin Bieber. Yep, Justin Bieber finally gets a passing grade. Those of you who saw either the tier list of his albums I did, or my Valentine's Day special probably saw this one coming. This album is Justin Bieber's second attempt at a redemption album, and unlike Purpose, he doesn't use a ton of sarcasm to deflect blame and hide his emotions. You can tell he knows he's in the wrong, and he talks about how he feels like he doesn't deserve his loved ones on songs like Deserve You, and how he has low self-esteem, and how fame has affected him. And of course there are the standard songs about love. However, even on the songs where he's just singing about love, I'd argue he does a much better job than he did on his early work. For one thing, he actually sounds sincere. Which, after listening to his first couple albums, yeah, that's a refreshing change of pace. Also, the instrumentation on this album is really good. I love the blend of synth pop and R&B, and the synthesizer on Die For You in particular is just beautiful. However, there's a reason this album is still in the bottom quarter of my list, and that would be that there are a few boring songs on here, like Holy, which I swear sounds like a contemporary Christian song, and also Off My Face, which is pretty generic, and Anyone, which a lot of people are saying is the best song on here, looking at you, Spectrum Pulse. But honestly, it doesn't have as much punch as it should. Also, those Martin Luther King skits could have been cut, and they should have been. Like, Justin, stop equating your struggles as a celebrity to the struggles of black people. It drags this album down significantly. Still, it's nice to see Justin Bieber talk about his problems without using sarcasm to deflect from them. As such, I give this a light 7 out of 10. Number 76, High Road by Kesha.
Neither of our boyfriends are even invited. When I'm with my best friend, I feel like myself again. Always make me laugh until I'm crying.
This album is good, but after Warrior and Rainbow, it's kind of underwhelming. First of all, the arrangement of this track list is all kinds of weird. It starts out sounding like old school Kesha, then it goes into slow song territory, then it goes into country territory, then it becomes weird, and then it goes back into country/slow song territory. Don't get me wrong, Kesha does all of these sounds reasonably well, but it's just kind of a weird way to structure a track list. As for the tracks themselves, well, I like old school Kesha, but the 4 songs at the beginning of this album are not good examples of it. The only song I really like from this batch is the title track, High Road. The other 3 all range from okay to downright annoying. As for the slow song section, you have Honey, which is just kind of a boring, slightly annoying song. But then you get Shadow, which is actually okay, even if it is a blatant retread of Love Into the Light. The 2 country songs are pretty good, although I would argue that Resentment is a bit of a slog. I mean, it's got good lyrics, and I like the guest artists, but I feel like it could have been a little more interesting musically. Cowboy Blues is great, though. It's super catchy, yet it still manages to be a country ballad. Then we have a pop section that I forgot to mention when I was listing off all the sections, and that includes this song called Kinky, which is a pretty good song that's very catchy and also about the importance of communicating with your partner in the bedroom, so points there. But then it has two other pop songs that are both kind of annoying. After that, we get the two best songs on the album. One of which being BFF, which is a beautiful ode to friendship. Kinda makes me wish I had friends outside of the internet. And then there's the potato song, parentheses, 'cause I want to. A lot of people think this is the worst song on the album, but honestly, I love that it sounds like something that would come out of a fantasy land full of elves and fairies, and I love how whimsical the lyrics get, too. The last two songs are pretty good, especially Father-Daughter Dance, which is a heartbreaking ballad. And then there's Chasing Thunder, which is also pretty good. Overall, this album is pretty good, but Kesha can do better. Light 7 out of 10. Number 75, Save Rock and Roll by Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy, to me, are the exact opposite of 21 Pilots, The Maine, and Kesha, in that I much prefer their early work to their later stuff. Their first 4 albums are pretty much flawless, and then it takes a bit of a dive. However, their new singles do give me faith that they might return to their old sound. That said, Save Rock and Roll is actually a pretty good album, unlike Mania, which we talked about in the last part. Sure, the band don't really sound like a band here, and there are some issues with overproduction, and Patrick Stump's vocals can go a bit too high for him at points. But there are a few songs that bring back that old rock and roll spirit, namely The Phoenix, which has a nice amount of aggression, and also My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark, Light 'Em Up, which still kinda sounds like a rock song. Even on songs like Where Did the Party Go, which is basically just a pop song, they still have some good lyrics, and the song itself is a lot of fun. Young Volcanoes is a great indie rock leaning song with some great anthemic lyrics as well. That said, this album is pretty flawed. For example, I already mentioned the production issues, but then there's the fact that Just One Yesterday and Alone Together are just plain boring. And not to mention Rat-a-Tat, which is an otherwise good song that gets ruined by an annoying intro from Courtney Love, of all people. Still, I'd argue the good outweighs the bad here. So, light 7 out of 10. Number 74, 21 Pilots' self-titled album. Another example of me not liking the early work of 21 Pilots as much as the later work. This is better than Regional at best. Mainly because it doesn't have a bunch of worse versions of songs on later albums, and also just because it has a few more good songs. However, I will say that Tyler's singing is pretty rough on this album, even on the good songs, and while the ideas on this album are interesting, they're not as polished as the ideas on later albums would be. That's not to say there aren't some great songs on here. Oh Misbeliever has easily the best vocal performance of 21 Pilots' career, or at least one of them. And Isle of Flightless Birds is one of the most interesting genre blends I've ever heard, to the point where it pretty much completely defies genre. I'm also a big fan of the fan favorite, Addict with a Pen, as well as the great storytelling songs, The Pantaloon and March to the Sea. And also the anti-suicide track, Friend Please. Unfortunately, this album does have some rough moments. Before You Start Your Day is just plain boring, and Implicit Demand for Proof has way too long of an intro. There are also a lot of songs on here that get ruined by one little thing. Air Catcher is a good song, but Tyler's vocal performance on that thing is terrible, despite the great instrumentation. And A Car, A Torch, A Death has this obnoxious dog whistle blaring in your ears every couple seconds. So yeah, this album is good, but 21 Pilots would do better in later years. Decent 7 out of 10. Number 73, Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. This is the first jazz album I ever heard in full, and while it's not the best, I'd still argue it's a pretty good album. So What and All Blues in particular have horn lines that will never leave my brain. And Freddie Freeloader is also a pretty good song. Also, the whole album has this relaxed, nocturnal kind of feel to it. However, I'm not a big fan of the tracks Blue and Green and Flamenco Sketches. Both of these songs are way too slow, and Flamenco Sketches in particular goes on way too long for this kind of song. Still, this is a pretty good jazz album. Solid 7 out of 10. Number 72, Ladies Love Outlaws by Waylon Jennings.
Love stray dogs. Ladies touch babies like a banker touches gold. Outlaws touch ladies somewhere deep down in their soul.
Now here's some good outlaw country. Ladies Love Outlaws is the album that coined the term originally, and this album is way less boring than that Willie Nelson album I covered in part 1. Ladies Love Outlaws, the song, is one of the best good girl, bad boy songs I've heard aside from He's a Rebel by the Crystals. And then there are the covers of Never Been to Spain and Delta Dawn, which are both great. And then there's Revelation, which makes me feel both embarrassed and also slightly pitying towards Waylon on that song. And also Thanks, which is just an underrated gem with an incredibly catchy chorus. As for the songs I don't care for, though, Frisco Depot is just plain boring. It sounds like one of those Willie Nelson songs from that Shotgun Willie album. And especially Sure Didn't Take Him Long, which is pathetic in much the same way that Everything I Ask For by The Maine is pathetic. It's basically a song where Waylon Jennings talks about this girl who left him, who he was sure, and is still sure, absolutely loved him, but the minute she saw a guy who was more attractive, she left. Like I said in my full review of this album, that doesn't sound like she loved you to me, Waylon. Still, 2 bad songs are not enough to ruin an album, so I'll give this a solid 7 out of 10. Number 71, Streets of Gold by 303. I'm one of the few people who will actually defend crunkcore And yes, that does include 303. There are so many fun, catchy songs here. I Can Do Anything, We Are Young, I Know How to Say, See You Go, Deja Vu, Double Vision. All of these songs are just pure, stupid fun. That said, there are a few songs on here that don't work for me. I'm Not the One is a blatantly insincere sounding ballad. The intro track, Beaumont, is kind of annoying, and House Party just sounds ugly. Also, this is yet another album where the singles aren't as good as the deep cuts. Sure, Touchin' on My and My First Kiss are both fun and whatnot, but compared to those deep cuts I mentioned, yeah, not that great. Also, R.I.P., R.I.P., Morgan's credibility. That was a reference to one of the songs on the album, in case you haven't heard it. I'll see myself out now. Number 70, American Beauty, American Psycho by Fall Out Boy. Like I said when I talked about Save Rock and Roll, American Beauty, American Psycho is a pretty good album, even if I'm not a fan of later Fall Out Boy and don't feel it's up to par with their early stuff. The singles are great, most notably Uma Thurman, which samples the Munsters theme and makes it sound really good. And Centuries, which is the pump-up anthem for the ages with the amazing line, "And you're a cherry blossom, you're about to bloom, you look so pretty, but you're gone so soon." I'm also a big fan of the catchy synth loop on "The Kids Aren't Alright," and my personal favorite song on the album is easily Novocaine, aka the most intense song on here, and also Jetpack Blues, which is a pretty great, heartbreaking ballad with a mournful atmosphere. However, I'm not really a fan of the song Favorite Record. It has this annoying robotic sound at the beginning, and Immortals is also way overproduced, which, to be fair, is a problem with this whole album again. But it's especially annoying on those two songs. Good album, but flawed. Solid 7 out of 10. Number 69, Kesha, Cannibal. Here's Kesha's EP that came out the same year as her album Animal. And while it is certainly better than Animal and High Road even, I'd still say that this is not great. Mainly because of the unnecessary dubstep remix of the title track from Animal that's tacked on at the end. And the song Grow a Pair, which is basically the Boys Don't Cry songs by The Cure, except it's unironic and literal. That said, this album has way better singles than Animal. Namely, We Are Who We Are and Blow, which are both great anthems to the outsiders. Other great tracks include Sleazy, which is just a fun song, and gets me singing along every single time. Cannibal, which is easily the darkest, grittiest song on this album. And Crazy Beautiful Life, which is the song that I will play if I ever become famous. So yeah, Good EP, but I just wish it was a bit more consistent. Solid 7 out of 10. Number 68, Redline by Laserhawk. Now for Synthwave album number 2. This one is less focused on being at a beach and more focused on cars. And in other words, yeah, this is a great album to drive to. Especially songs like the fast-paced and fun Overdrive, the car-themed anthems of Pedal to the Metal and Dream Machine. Also, Electric Groove is more of a sex song, but it's still a great song. However, aside from the few highlights I just mentioned, most of the songs on this album range from pretty good to decent. Most of them are pleasant, but don't really stand out all that much, especially the last 4 tracks. The Fix and Redline also kind of fall into this category, but they're both pretty good, but Redline is a bit too slow, and The Fix just sounds kind of lopsided. In other words, this album has just enough highlights to elevate it to a strong 7 out of 10. Number 67, Try This by Pink.
All good, mix it up, that's my ticket. Cruising in my Cadillac, Escalade tricking. Sometimes like it easy, sometimes like it rugged.
I've been a Pink fan for years. I even own a greatest hits album from her on CD. That said, this is my first full-length album experience with her, and yeah, it's pretty good. And I chose this one because it's slightly more gritty sounding than some of her other albums, from what I've heard. As a rock fan, I like that. Indeed, the best songs on this album are the more rock-leaning ones. My personal favorite on here is easily Humble Neighborhoods, which is one of the 3 songs from this album I'd heard prior to going into the full album. Seriously, that song is borderline punk, and also Try Too Hard is also kind of borderline punk, which as a punk fan, I approve of. Other great songs include Save My Life, which is a heartbreaking song about drug addiction, the fun party song Tonight's the Night, and of course, the other borderline punk song Trouble, and God is a DJ, which I recognized from Mean Girls, actually. Also, Feel Good Time. That one's pretty unique sounding, with its electronic elements mixed in with the pop. That said, Catch Me While I'm Sleeping is a very boring R&B song. And the rest of the album ranges from pretty good to decent. The song Oh My God could have been great, except at the end, Pink starts going on about how she wants your coochie coo. The rest of the track list is like that, with a bunch of songs could have been great being ruined by 1 or 2 elements that don't work. Strong 7 out of 10. Number 66, Lies They Tell Our Children by Anti-Flag. This album is the definition of flawed but good to me. Side A in particular has a bunch of generic protest songs that don't really mean anything. Imperialism, however, is a great song about what imperialism actually is. It's basically the equivalent of someone going into your house and taking all of your stuff. And Modern Meta Medicine has some great lyrics, as well as some more aggressive riffs, which I liked. And I'll even admit to enjoying Victory or Death, Give 'Em Hell, because, well, it's catchy, what can I say? However, I'm not a big fan of any of the other songs on Side A. They're not bad, just kind of generic. Then Side B happens, and the album mostly improves. The Hazardous has a bit more intensity and a slightly more unique sound. Work and Struggle has great lyrics about the evils of capitalism, as well as a really catchy chorus. And Only in My Head has a great vocal performance, particularly on the chorus with those high notes. Shallow Graves, on the other hand, is good lyrically, but musically it's a little thin sounding, I'd say. And Never Ever is just pretty good. So yeah, this album is flawed, but I still really enjoy it. Strong 7 out of 10. Number 65, ABCDEFG by Chumbawamba.
James.
Yes, this is the band that did the I Get Knocked Down song, aka Tub Thumper. For those of you who don't know, meaning those of you who haven't watched Todd in the Shadow's One Hit Wonderland episode, or Mike the Snare's Deep Discog Dive, Chumbawamba are a way more interesting band than their one hit would have you believe. They started out as an anarchist punk band before transitioning into pop, and then, at the end of their career, going into folk. But they kept the anarchist lyrics the entire time. No, I'm not kidding. This is one of their folk albums, and I'd argue it's a pretty good folk album. And also, this is basically a concept album about all the ways music can be used to bring people together. Even the title of this album is named after music notes. And all of the songs are music themed. The opening song, Voices That's All, is a song about the decline of bar chants and how it ruined the people's sense of community. Yeah, that's weirdly deep. It's also really catchy and fun, as are all of the more energetic songs on this album, which are also, for the most part, my favorites. The album continues with a stream of great songs from there. For example, Wagner at the Opera is a great song to nod your head to, and also a song about how a Holocaust survivor actually interrupted an opera production of one of Wagner's operas because Wagner was a known anti-Semite who Hitler absolutely loved. Singing Out the Days has an amazing rhythm to it, and it's basically about soldiers singing to try to forget the fact that they're miserable. The Devil's Interval is a song about the stereotypes of certain types of music being satanic by evangelicals. Rat-a-tat-tay seemed like a weird song to me at first, but apparently it's actually based on the true story of a guy who was about to be mugged, but then he started singing Rat-a-tat-tay, which is apparently some kind of sound poem. And apparently the guys who were about to mug him got so scared that they ran away. Again, interesting concept. My two favorites on this album include Torturing James Hetfield and Dance Idiot Dance. These songs are both super catchy, and both are quite hilarious as well. Torturing James Hetfield, in particular, is about Chumbawamba torturing the lead singer of Metallica, because apparently James Hetfield allowed for Metallica's music to be used as torture at Guantanamo Bay. So this is Chumbawamba firing back at him for that. And yes, it's very funny. And then there's Dance Idiot Dance, which is basically a song making fun of fascists who are trying to co-opt English folk music. And yeah, it's pretty funny as well. Other great songs include Underground, which took some getting used to for me since it's one of the slower songs. But then it got stuck in my head. The other songs on this album aren't quite as good. A lot of them are a bit too slow, but even the worst song on this album has an interesting concept. And there are a few other pretty good songs, so strong 7 out of 10. Number 64, Mother Earth by Within Temptation. I've loved Within Temptation since I was a preteen. Their first 5 albums are extremely nostalgic for me. Mother Earth in particular is a great nature-themed symphonic metal album with elements of folk metal. This was before they basically sold out and started sounding like Evanescence, and while I do prefer some of that stuff just because I'm an Evanescence fan, I still really enjoy this sound. Ice Queen, in particular, is a beautiful song with a cold, frosty atmosphere, making it the perfect song to listen to in the winter. In Perfect Harmony is a beautiful, comforting song that honestly makes me wish I could live in the world that the lyrics describe. Dark Wings is an intense song with a catchy chorus, and Deceiver of Fools reminds me of every slimy politician ever and is a great rebuttal to them. Other great songs include Our Farewell, which is a beautiful ode to a lost loved one, and Caged, which has easily the best vocal performance on here. I love how beautiful and lush the symphonic elements on all of these songs are. The one track on here I feel could have been cut is Intro. This is basically just an interlude, and it has some very annoying whispering in it. Also, it's not even the first song, so I'm gonna have to sue for false advertising Within Temptation. Still, I give this album a light 8 out of 10. Number 63, Rush's self-titled album. Ah yes, Rush's self-titled. This album is very different from every other Rush album out there. It's less complex, it's more of a standard hard rock album than a prog album, and they had a completely different drummer. To be fair, this isn't a bad Led Zeppelin pastiche. Finding My Way has an excellent guitar riff. In the Mood is an underrated gem that's just pure stupid fun. And Working Man is a classic for a reason. I'm also a big fan of Need Some Love, which is easily the most Led Zeppelin sounding song on here. And What You're Doing, which is also just fun. In fact, that's a good way to describe this album. Fun! It's not deep, and it doesn't need to be. It does what it needs to do, and it does it well. However, I will say that Here Again is a complete slog, and it drags on way too long, and the instrumentation does not switch up enough to warrant that length. Still, it's not enough to prevent this from getting a light 8 out of 10. Number 62, Still Not Getting Any by Simple Plan. I've loved since I was 12. And then I went through a phase where I hated them, but then I realized I only hated them because I really, really wanted to. Yes, their music is whiny, but that's the point. It's music that's designed to help teenagers, and I know this because they have a charity called the Simple Plan Foundation, which is specifically dedicated to teenage issues. For what it is, it works really well. It's whiny, sure, but it's also just specific enough that it's relatable without feeling pandering. The choruses are catchy. The instrumentation ranges from bouncy and fun to downright beautiful, and I honestly don't mind Pierre's vocals. The one thing I don't like would be Perfect World, which is a bit too vague in what it's about. Say what you want about the other songs, they're all about specific topics. Other than that, this album is great. Light 8 out of 10. Number 61, Back in Black by AC/DC. This album is a lot like Rush's self-titled in that it's pure stupid fun. The title track Back in Black is a classic for a reason. And I really enjoy the chorus on What Do You Do for Money, Honey, which is easily my favorite non-single from here. You Shook Me All Night Long is also a really great song, though not as great as Back in Black. I also enjoy Shoot to Thrill, Shake a Leg, and Giving the Dog a Bone, even though that last one is really stupid. Honestly, there's not much I can say about the good songs on here. They're just fun, hard rock songs. It's also one of those albums where all the songs kinda sound alike, but it works because they do such a good job with it. The songs I don't like as much are Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution and Let Me Put My Love Into You, which are both slower, more bluesy songs, which normally I wouldn't mind, but this is AC/DC. If I'm listening to AC/DC, I want energy, which is also part of the reason Hell's Bells is just pretty good to me and not great like the other two singles. Also, on an unrelated note, AC/DC was my first ever favorite band. When I was like 3 years old, my mom would always play their greatest hits album for me, and I loved it even as a 3-year-old. My brother was a Hank Williams fan at that age, by the way. Oh, and Light 8 out of 10. And with that, we are officially 2/5 into this list, which means we have to stop here. Don't worry, though, part 3 is coming soon. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'm Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer, and I'm out.